to Beyond the Ring, a podcast that covers all things in the stock show industry from the informative to the insane, starring Ryan Rash and Dale Hummel. Now on with the show.
Welcome to Beyond the Ring. This is Dale Hummel without co-star Ryan Rash this week. I'm still trying to work out if he has been kidnapped by the stalker that's been sending him roses, or if he's scheduled too heavy on the county fair circuit somewhere across the United States. I did get word he will be back next week with unicorns, rainbows, and butterflies. With that said, I am very fortunate to have two of our former guests jump in this week to discuss various topics with very little direction. I do appreciate Matt Claeys and Eric Fugate willingness to help out with this week, coming in at short notice on our guest list. You may remember a great episode about drug testing with Mr. Matt Claeys that joined us early in the Beyond the Ring episodes, and Eric Fugate more recently covering everything swine. At this moment, we do have Matt with us, by the way. Eric is having some technical difficulties, so he may jump in midway through. It's just hard telling with Eric, but we do have you, don't we, Matt?
I'm here.
And I greatly appreciate it. We're going to jump into some current events, and I see a happy face on our screen, Matt.
Eric's there.
Mr. Fugate, can you hear us?
I can. Welcome to the boony. I live an eighth of a mile from one of the bigger, technical places in Illinois, and I am like 8 miles from the birthplace of the internet and the supercomputer, and I can't get a freaking internet connection. This makes no sense. So.
But you are with us. I gave you the biggest, strongest introduction you've ever had, and you missed it.
I seriously doubt that. Claeys it on the step at a later time. But first off, before we get into topics, apologize for the delay. Matt, I don't know about you, but I got to get something off my chest I'm pissed about here. So, a while back, Dale, you did your yearly wrap-up of the first year in business with this deal.
Oh, my.
And I never heard my name mentioned once. Not once.
Did we mention Matt?
I don't know. Matt, did they?
I think so.
I
don't
so.
remember.
Yeah, I think so.
I didn't even mention. And the other thing you think, I don't know how many people have been on here twice besides the obvious two guest stars. I just think at least Beyond the Ring hoodies are the least they could do for us in terms of
I can commit to that.
Okay.
And you two were easy go-tos. I thought, well, who can we call in here last minute that'll be just fine with this? That was easy.
I listened to the whole stupid show just waiting for my name to be mentioned, and it never got mentioned. It made me mad all weekend, I'll be honest. So.
Well, sometimes we forget things, and I am getting a little older, as all of us are. Yeah. So maybe it just got overlooked. But we're very happy to have you on tonight.
I'm ecstatic. So yeah.
So again, everybody knows Ryan obviously will not be with us tonight. He will be back next week, and he's going to be he's going to be all positive, no negative by any means. It's going to be really, really good. With that said, I think all three of us are going to jump into current events. And before we get too deep into such, I want to give a shout out. I had a great experience at Iowa this past weekend at one of their showdowns, the best of the best. This show, guys, it was a privilege to go in there and do it. And sometimes you go do these shows and you're excited to do it. And maybe it's not organized or maybe there's something that isn't just perfect. This was as good as it gets. They brought, I believe, 14 county fair champions of all four species into one location that they do there in Iowa. And they've got such large crowds, enthusiasm. They had a young man sing the national anthem to begin with. Great youth, great stock. Organization was through the roof. Everything was really good. This is probably one of my top 5 easily, that as far as enjoyable experiences. And guess what? When they play that national anthem and everybody's excited about it and applauding, when you have a crowd that really gets into supporting those youth, it just makes all the difference in the world. And it was good. So thank you for those that were involved in putting that on, that participated, everything surrounding that best of the best shootout was pretty amazing. So I appreciate having that opportunity.
Dale, I got a question for you. So there's 14
Yes.
animals of each sex and each species there, right?
Correct.
Do they break that down to smaller classes by weight, or is it just all 14 at one time, or how do they do it?
No, all 14 come in at one time, and you have at it. For example, in the goat doe show, there was 6-year-old mature does that were more on the full blood side. There was 6-month-old weather dams. You're going to get some variation. As I looked at it, I remember that the breeding gilts came in. I actually did the goats and the pigs. Scott Griner did the sheep and the cattle. So it worked well. We could alternate and go back to the backdrop and get pictures, and it allowed it to flow pretty well. But it's a pretty, I mean, it's different when they come into the ring and you haven't been there sorting all day. And I mean, normally you get to the champion drive, you've got a pretty good idea where you're going to land.
Mm-hmm.
Here they come in, and I mean, it's a different experience. I enjoyed it. You're not mentally or physically wore out when you get done. It's kind of nice. With that said, there's one more thing. Mr. Fugate, do you remember the McCluskeys from St. Louis?
Very much so. We talked about on the last podcast in February.
Yes. Do you want to know what Mike Parson, the governor of Missouri, did today?
Did he pardon him or what?
He did. He pardoned him.
All right.
That was the best pardon there's ever been.
Yeah, in my extensive research, I didn't catch that. I would have brought that up to you because I know you are a card-carrying member of the McCluskey fan club. So
yeah, they're great.
Yeah. So
they are great. Let's jump into the Olympics. Anybody got anything to add on the Olympics?
Well, because of all my internet situations here, first off, I'm missing valuable gymnastics time right now. But that's okay. That's okay.
I'm not a fan. I've avoided watching gymnastics completely.
Okay. So what's
did we not have somebody just say I'm not competing because I chose not to?
She's competing tonight.
Okay, well that's nice. I'm glad she decided to do that.
And we know the results. So have you watched any of the Olympics?
I've watched a little water polo. I've kept up a little bit. I'm not happy with this Gwen Berry, the hammer throw lady that put her fist up in protest twice before she competed and then ends up finishing 11th out of 12th. So she's obviously focused on the protest and not the event.
So, Matt, have you watched much of it?
No, I really haven't watched much of the Olympics. I did watch a little bit of the soccer the other night. I was down at the Ozark Empire, sorting cattle Friday, Saturday, and Sunday down there. And that was a nice event. Great people and just darn hot. It was 100 degrees down there, but in not any controlled environment in which the livestock get showed in. But it was good. So I haven't really followed much of the Olympics. As Dale knows, I read and follow a lot of other things and try to send him some stuff, but I haven't followed too much of the Olympics. And after the announcement of the fractured gymnastic team, I kind of lost interest. Yeah. I started watching, but then I kind of lost interest.
So we'll say I'm probably of you three, I'm the expert on the Olympics because I've watched a lot of it, and I've taken time out of Ted Lasso, the binge watching that to watch the Olympics. First off, the more I think about this whole gymnastics thing, the more I don't get quite as stressed as I originally was, and I think it comes down to this: you got a 24-year-old girl that's been through a lot. I mean, she was part of the whole Nasser deal up there, and with the doctor and all his sickening issues, and she's been through a lot. She's obviously very, very good. I personally think the more I think about this, I think that it's her family and her parents have never missed a meet until this one. And I think that, in my opinion, is thinking about it. If that's been your go-to strategy all along, is your safety net or your ritual, and it's taken away on the highest stage where fractions of an inch can really make huge differences, not only in terms of scores, but in the safety, then all of a sudden, I honestly believe, I think the more I think about it, the more I think that just started the downward spiral. And, it's amazing that we've managed to cobble together what we have. But Dale, I don't get too fired up on the chick holding up her fist because the Olympics have been political since Adolf Hitler.
It has been. I still don't approve. That doesn't allow me the justification to approve of it, especially when it's been very clear that the Olympic Committee is out. They want none of it.
Yeah. Jesse Owens peed all over the Nazi party at that point in time. And then you had in the 60s, the black guys who raised their hands in protest, which started all this.
And you know what? And I can almost accept that because of the time.
Yeah. And then, then in the 70s, we had, I guess it was, 72, we had the assassinations in Munich, and that was a bad situation. And then to top it all off, we've had a couple boycotts. So the Olympics have always been political, as will anything where you have nations competing against each other. So I don't get too worked up on that.
I cannot accept the fact that they're going to turn their back to the American flag or any of these things. If America is such a bad country to represent, then don't. I'd like to know what country they think they're going to run to that is given more opportunity, because I don't believe it exists.
Well, and that's my point too. Is you're getting an all expense paid trip to Japan to sleep on a cardboard bed and stay in a room and wear a mask all the time, and you turn your back on your country, then don't represent your country. I mean, I was watching some beach volleyball or men's beach volleyball. Hell, the two dudes that were I can't remember which country it was. It was a Middle Eastern country. Neither of them are from that country. They basically had their agents call up and see how much the country would pay them to represent them, and then they became citizens so they can do it. So
it is that loosely run, I believe.
Yeah. And I was reading today there's some countries you get a gold medal, you get $1 million. We give about 50,000. So all that. But one last thing, and then I'm going to shut up and let Matt talk because I've ate too much air as it is now. But the big thing you mentioned is water polo. That's the most fascinating sport to me, because what this Olympics shows me is no matter who you are or what your body type is, you can find a sport somewhere in the world that fits you. Okay. Bruce Springsteen's daughter's riding a
You're telling us you could have been a water polo star.
No, unfortunately, I look at my daughter too, and she has a little bit of my physique. She probably is more athletic, but not a lot more. And my favorite athlete, and it's not even close, is and I think we're in the quarterfinals now. Watch the center on the women's water polo team next time they play. They played today, I think, but that was not in the semifinals. They played. She is by no means a specimen like you'd imagine a person who treads water 18 hours a day looks like. She takes up a lot of space, and her whole job is to go in there and find 2 or 3 people, grab a hold of them with some part of her body, leg or arm, and dunk their asses underwater as much as they can, so that the little skinny girls can fire at the goal. And I could have done that. So now if the Olympics go on in 3 years, I might transition if I can get that job.
I love it, and she does it well.
Oh, and you look at her first, you kind of go, what's she doing there? And then you find out she's the best in the world. She's not only best in the United States, she's the best in the world at doing this, and she's done it for 20 years. And I'm just going, oh my God. So so it's fascinating. So that's what I take out between curling and archery. There's an Olympic sport somewhere for me. It's just not ski jumping, I can tell you that. So, but I'll shut up past that. So.
Okay, great Olympic update. Thank you, Mr. Fugate. I would like to talk, because it's all over. We're talking about masking up and locking down and the Delta variant. There's so much confusion out there from one news channel to the next, and even if you try to follow anything on social media, which they're restricting so much on there of the truth, it just baffles me how it's even possible. But fortunately, Eric and I are going to rely on Mr. Claeys here to use his. We're going to take advantage of his scientific mind. Matt, if you could please give your perspective on where we're at as a country with the Delta variant.
Well, the Delta variant is something that I think is just being really overplayed, and it's a political control situation. I think that if you really want to understand a lot about the Delta variant, I would recommend that you go to just Google peak prosperity. And Dr. Chris Martenson is wonderful at taking the headlines and then breaking down the data. And is the Delta variant certainly more contagious? Yes, it is. And you'll learn about P681 and how we have changed to an arginine, which triggers then that it's more susceptible at being able to enter the cell. And that's why it is certainly a more contagious virus. But the effect that it has is not very strong. Typically, as a virus mutates, it gets weaker in terms of the symptoms and those types of things that would result. It does become more contagious, but then it comes something like the flu or the cold. We've never been able to get rid of the cold, or very limited success with the flu. But I think that the media is really overplaying it. They're pushing for people to be vaccinated. And he has some really, really interesting data from UK and India. And they're talking about this huge spike, right, in terms of the Delta virulent and where we're at and how much increase. But if you look at where we were, if you look at that India data, they were down there near zero, right, compared to where they used to be. And so has it increased? Yes, but we're still talking about minor numbers relative to what it would have been months ago when we saw, two big spikes there. And interestingly, too, in that data set from India, we see from their high point and how it has declined and maintained at a very low level in terms of their infection rate. It's all correlates to the use of Ivomec or ivermectin in that country, and has had huge success at preparing oneself, and we've talked about, Dale, you and I privately, about the Math Plus program, and there's some really neat research being done down at Houston with a very, very intelligent doctor that speaks 9 different languages and has done over 1,000 interviews, and certain segments of it always get cut out. And I would encourage everybody, if you're wanting to see the truth about the data, go to Peak Prosperity. Dr. Chris Martinson does a really good job. He's easy to listen to. He doesn't make it complicated. And I would recommend you go and listen to him. Bill Crane's always got good stuff. Dr. McCullough also has good information on his website as well.
Well, Eric, I consider all 3 of us pretty educated individuals, and I even took biochemistry twice in graduate school, by the way. It wasn't voluntary, but I did.
I sense that just knowing your scholastic history, but I wasn't going to look it up, so.
I did take it twice. And Matt, you broke it down where I could pretty much understand it. But that's after 2 semesters, full semesters of biochemistry.
Dale, I set the curve in biochemistry. That's a different story.
I appreciate that.
I have a funny story, and I'm sure he'll listen to this and call me and chew my ass out. On a non-Delta variety, I have some coworkers who don't get the vaccine, and I don't judge. You don't want to get it, don't get it. You have your own reasons, and I'm not going to fault you for it. There may be consequences. We both have heard that, but we don't know for sure. And so one of my coworkers didn't get it. I was talking to him last night. Well, he broke with COVID and had been sequestered for 2 weeks. And in the process, his quote was, "I just can't figure out how I got it." He says, "There was only 477 people at the wedding and 7 people got it. Who would have thought I'd be one of them?" I said, "Well, my guess is 470. I'm probably the vaccinated, but you weren't." But that's my thoughts. But so it's an interesting deal. I'll let Matt keep passing on the coronavirus stuff to you, and I'll keep passing Bigfoot stuff off to you. So,
got it. Well, Matt, thank you for that explanation. There is one thing that hit the news pretty hard today. By the way, we're recording on a Tuesday this week. And Governor Cuomo, did he make the news today, guys?
Actually, he gave us a break from COVID. I was actually kind of happy.
He did.
He
did. Well, Matt, what'd you think? Did you get to see his rebuttal to the charges that the Attorney General threw at him?
I saw his rebuttal and was
pre-recorded.
A little confused by the rebuttal, particularly when he hadn't done any of the stuff that he's accused of. But then they had a montage of photographs of him kissing and grabbing people all over, right? And that's just his nature. I found it a little bit ironic in terms of that's your rebuttal. But
I could call it incriminating.
Yeah, it could add to the story.
Yeah, the smartest thing that Biden said since he took presidency is the day that he had to step down or get impeached, one of the two. That's the first. That's the first thing that's made sense he said in a long time, as far as I'm concerned. So,
and I think it's because he had no choice. He was that card had played where he had to come out and say that. But you're right. That's the most intelligent thing he said.
Well, you said card. I'm sure he read it off of a card, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So. Yeah. Yeah.
I have no doubt that he was going to go down that direction, but I don't know if he's going to. I don't think he'll resign. I think the legislative body of New York will probably impeach him. I don't know, but he does not seem to be giving up any ground whatsoever, nor admitting any fault whatsoever.
They're kind of in a rock and a hard place, because if they don't impeach him, then they're not really standing by what they've been preaching for God knows how long, number one. But at the same time, he got caught in the same rock, because he pretty much said, I'm not going to make a comment or say a word until the attorney general comes out from New York and makes her statement, vindicating me. Well, she didn't vindicate him. Just the opposite. She pretty much said, dude, you're guilty and guilty as charged, and here's the reasons why, and laid out a pile of them. So, I think the whole Democratic regime there in New York and, above, is caught in a rock and a hard place here, because they got nowhere to go but to impeach him, as far as I'm concerned. So,
I'm sure by the time this drops, we'll know a whole lot more on Friday. So we're probably a little behind the time. But what I was concerned with on the Attorney General, she talked about she did her job, that she found 11 credible sources that basically she believes him to be guilty of these, but she says there's going to be no criminal charges. There's only going to be civil suits involved. I don't understand that.
Welcome to 2021 in the United States.
Yes, I'm thoroughly confused. Well, I have two brilliant minds with me today. We are going to continue. This is not necessarily current events, and it's not necessarily the main topic, but we're going to talk about some more current events that are agriculture related specific. And I have not done an update on the Oregon Proposition 13 that we had talked about, the proposition in Colorado that finally got shot down by the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, the Oregon initiative only needs 112,000 signatures to make the ballot in November 2022. It appears as though it's on track to do so. I'm not saying that the Supreme Court or somebody cannot step in to stop it, but as of right now, it does not appear as though that's going to happen. It does mimic what we talked about in Colorado to a certain degree, maybe even takes it further, where the Oregon initiative is probably more insane than Colorado. Oregon only is going to allow harvesting of meat when an animal dies of natural causes. So there's no slaughtering of animals of any age. It takes artificial insemination as a sexual abuse of an animal and a felony if done in the presence of a minor. We're way out there, guys. Way, way out there.
So let me get this straight, and I haven't read enough about this. Shame on me. So we're no different than vultures now. The only time we can get the meat is if we pick it up as roadkill on the side of the road.
If you're in Oregon, and the problem is, I am fearful. It's you. I mean, obviously the cities control the state, and Portland's going to make the decision. And if I know anything about Portland, guess what?
Oh yeah,
it's going to go that direction. What's interesting at the same time, I saw on the news today that there was a Proposition 12 in California back in 2018, and this proposition was all about allowing for a certain amount of space guidelines for pork, veal, and chickens. Maybe beef was in there as well, but because of the nature of cow-calf operations, it didn't necessarily apply. I'm not sure on that. It appears as though the veal and the chicken operations across the country are, for the most part, meeting these requirements, but only 4% of the pork produced in the country meet the actual 2018 proposition that was set into place and voted upon overwhelmingly by the populace in California. So this now in turn means that January 1st of 2022, pork is going to be in very limited supply in California unless something changes. So with that, California consumes about 15% of the pork produced in our country, which is pretty high. Fortunately for California, they produce 45 million pounds of pork per month in the state of California, which they'll still have in the process. However, the state consumes 225 million pounds of pork per month. So they're going to come up way short. So if we kind of summarize, how does this affect things? There's no way the rest of the country is going to comply to something that was on a initiative in California in 2018. It just isn't going to happen. Now, there are other states that have followed suit, and it will continue to come over the next few years. So I don't know if we're going to change our entire dynamic of how pork is raised. I don't think it's probably going to happen. But if we take half the pork supply, and it's going to be more than that, was lost in California, if you do the math on this, it's going to probably increase the price by 60% in that state, taking a $6 package of bacon in 2021 up to about $9.60 in 2022. I have a feeling, and if it's very restricted on what you can even buy for pork, don't you think those crazy bastards that voted on this back in 2018 are going to think, damn, what did I do?
I'm not sure that they're going to think that, it's.
You think they're still okay with it?
Well, you never know as to what they're going to think, and on the swine side of things, that had to do with getting rid of crates, right? And even the
Correct.
USDA was looking at that. And Bernie Rollins, I don't know if you guys know Bernie out at Colorado State, just really, really sharp guy. I always enjoy visiting with Bernie, and he was giving a talk here at Purdue one time and was talking about the crates and how they're not right and all that kind of stuff. And I took him out to what we were doing here. And in actuality, if you give the hog a choice, so we have set up where they can get in a crate or they can go out to a common area. And if you give those sows or gilts a choice, guess what they do?
They probably spend most of the time in the crate.
They will go in a crate. Now they'll also come out to the common area.
Now, in the defense of those animal rights activists, that the gestation crates are probably one of the easiest targets in animal agriculture because they aren't going to have access to what you're talking about right there. But it makes for a pretty horrific picture, and I think it's something that they can play the sympathy card on pretty hard of everything that's happening in animal agriculture right now.
I don't think the general population understands the level of aggression and the problems that massive group housing have. Between establishing a dominance order, and then when you pull a few out to go feral, then that has to be reestablished again, to when they all are in one pile, and as they get closer to farrowing, they get large vulvas. The vulvas get stepped on and ripped on and everything else. It's not. There's no perfect way of raising animals right now that is completely free of injury and stress. So to a certain degree, it's the greater good and preference. And you're exactly right, Matt. I did my master's thesis was on gestation environments, and that's what we saw is that the crates. Even when we retroed the crates in front of pens, is they spend most of their time in the crates because they didn't have to worry about the aggression. They had an adulterated space to lay in, where they could lay in there and not have other ones pile on them or anything else. And when it was feeding time, they could eat and didn't have to find anybody else for their share of the food. So I just don't think a lot of folks talk, or a lot of people understand that or talk about it or think about it for that matter.
And I do think that there's a number of companies that have set goals to eliminate gestation crates within their swine operation, but most of them are phasing in. And Eric, you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I want to say that those goals were set for 2025 to eliminate.
At the very yes, at the very least, yes.
So maybe those. Some of those propositions they said there's 12 other states that have something similar to this, maybe not quite as restrictive. Maybe they'll be able to meet some of those.
But Dale, let's also be honest. Okay, so it's not just pork. If they go after pork now, the next thing's chicken because they can say the same thing about chickens and whatever.
They
else.
have it's in that they gave space requirements in that as well. I don't know if it was just more. Wasn't as if they allowed for more restriction or if the companies actually changed. I
think it's a little both. But my point is, let's all be clear on this. This is the first step towards the ultimate goal, which is the complete vegan agenda.
Absolutely. No, that's
so they're not doing this to make animals live in pastures and get rid of what they perceive to be too big of farms and all that stuff, and they're going to stop. The next step is to take to the next step, and then the next step, and eventually, basically make meat in general. So it's the mean to an end, and the end is a complete vegan agenda.
And there's a push. We can talk about the green movement on the energy side. We can talk about the vegan movement on the animal agriculture. All of those things are real and they're happening. And if we don't stand up and speak up and fight back, they may get their way.
Yeah. And really, I hope California figures it out because those carnita carnita tacos and the food trucks are awesome. I would hate to lose those things. So.
I would hate. That's probably my favorite reason. That and strawberry stands in California.
Well,
That's my reason to go.
So yeah, so.
It is there. There's one more thing, guys. You're both, I'm sure, aware of this, and then we'll go on to our main topic. But African swine fever has hit the Western Hemisphere, maybe the first time in 40 plus years. I believe Dominican Republic. Is that correct, guys?
Yep.
Yes.
This is concerning. I hope it never makes it to our shores. I don't know if that's a realistic expectation, but I hope it doesn't. I do not want this discussion to put people in a panic, as it's not the intent, but rather to educate our listeners just a little bit about African swine fever and for them to be more informed about this topic. And I'm going to kind of open it up, but there's a lot of different ways that this can be spread. And I before COVID hit, I've been very fortunate to be able to travel a large part of the world. And when I'm traveling the world into areas with African swine fever, it's evident to me that it would not be difficult to bring it back, especially if I came back to this country and had an active hog operation on my place or visited one. So I think the reason to talk about some of these methods of transmission, if we have somebody that lives in the city of Chicago that travels abroad and it comes back on their shoes, or they bring a pork stick back or whatever, I think the chances are still very, very low statistically that that's going to get to our swine population. But if somebody active in animal agriculture, specifically swine, were to bring something back with them, it is realistic. It can happen. So with that said, I'm going to open it up. Was it Belgium, guys, that broke with African swine because of scraps being fed from a cruise ship? Is that a possible? I don't even know which country. One of them, maybe Germany. I'm not sure which one in Europe broke for that. But there's so many ways that this can be spread that we've got to be smart about this, because guess what? We're targeting, as far as a Beyond the Ring podcast, most of the people that are listening are revolving around the show ring and hopefully commercial livestock production. But this would change the swine show ring as we know it.
Oh, it would change a lot of things that we do. I think, interestingly enough, you probably ought to be just aware of what African swine fever symptoms are and what happens. So in the show pigs, right, they can run a really high fever, 107 plus, extremely high fevers. Those hogs will have severe diarrhea. They'll get skin discoloration. And then, you're going to have a high death loss, but in the farrowing side or on the sow side of things, it's going to cause abortions. And you'll even see on those pigs in the crate or in the nursery, you'll see them really piling up when they typically won't be, right? And so you need to keep an eye out. I would really watch for the show pig people, the real high fever, the skin discoloration, and the extreme diarrhea with that. Now, interestingly, though, did you guys see what happened or what they're projecting? Because China has increased their harvest numbers a great deal. So our exports for the third quarter are expected to go down 35%. Isn't that right, Eric? 35%.
Yep.
Pork exports are expected to go down. So they have managed through that, and their harvest numbers were way higher than I think anybody anticipated in China.
That's interesting. And I'm going to assume that a lot of just the number of hogs there that are in what I call backyard farms. And I have not been there to witness that, but I would have thought it would have been very, very difficult to get a handle on that.
Yeah. And also we're trusting the Chinese numbers too. So
good point.
That is a questionable one as well. Couple things, I wouldn't worry about symptoms in the show pigs because we're going to know it's here before the first show pig gets it. Is the way I look at it. First off, secondly, it's a big virus. It moves slow. I saw some interesting presentations about the fact that with good biosecurity and high fences, you can kind of slow this down if you are diligent and organized. You're not going to shut it out, and it's debilitating. But, the example I heard from one of the Eastern European countries was a while back, there were positive cases. And then, down the road, there was a negative case, and they never really crossed over because they shot all the wild boars, number one. But then number two, it's a big enough virus that moves slow enough. It's not like PED and PERS and some of those things. People ask about vaccines. We're going to have one eventually at some point in time, but in vaccine terms, soon could be as long as 5 or 10 years. I don't think it'll be that long. Once again, it's just tough to make one, and it's tough to do one quickly. So that's that thing. But I was talking to Dale about this earlier today. I visualize my job, that working with commercial producers and those things. That's concerning to me because it's gonna, if it comes, it will debilitate those even more so than the show industry and really restrict livestock movements. So I think you're going to start seeing more and more of the larger operations trying to control shackle space within a certain amount of space area around their pigs. So if they do go into some type of zone type of isolation to try to eradicate, they can do that. I quite frankly, the national show pig scene will get shut down. There's just no question in my mind. I still think there might be hog shows eventually, but they'll be back to the old school kind of county shows, local shows within a zone is where you'll see that at. Because if you can move hogs and ship hogs, you could sure as heck probably make it a terminal show and show them as well. So,
no, that makes sense. And you brought up an interesting fact. And to me, my biggest fear is I think you're right with high fences in our bigger commercial operations, biosecurity. I think if and we don't know if China's lying about the numbers. I assume China lies about everything, but I think we could control that if we put the right steps in place. Let's say it invades our shores in a couple of years. I do believe we can get through it. The biggest hurdle that I see in that, and I'm coming in pretty blind to this, if it hits our feral hog population, because my Texas friends say there is no way to eliminate every feral hog. And I don't know that for a fact, but I think it'd be pretty difficult.
I'd volunteer to get one of those helicopters and just shoot the shit out of
that
them. That looks like a lot of fun.
Would that not be fun?
So yeah, it does. And you're right. That's the big thing is the feral population. We're not the only state. Every country has that problem. But the longer we delay, the closer we may have to some type of treatment or vaccine for it. So that's the reality is keep this sucker out as long as possible and hopes the smart minds out there that are brewing up stuff can figure out something quickly that will slow the process down. So is the way I look at it.
Yeah, but I do think that it will. And you're right, Eric. It's a slower moving situation. But you think about the interstate commerce that goes on. And just take Indiana. We have two major swine packing places here. And there's a large percentage of those hogs that are not raised in Indiana that get harvested there.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, and you don't really realize the amount of livestock being transported. And I didn't, I'll be honest, because I've been over in Indiana, close to both those plants, and saw hogs moving out of there with different license plates and all kinds of different things. But when you get up in the middle of Iowa, somewhere up there, north of Des Moines, and go to lunch somewhere and just sit next to a window and start counting the number of livestock transportation vehicles that go by that window. And I'm not just talking hogs, it's chickens, it's stuff. It's incredible.
No, I agree, guys. I appreciate that insight. And again, we're not trying to scare people saying African swine fever is coming, but it appears to be working its way around the world. It's just that simple of a fact. I think maybe COVID shutting all the international, I guess a lot of the international traffic down has probably delayed things. And let's hope it never makes it here. Let's hope we have the precautionary steps in place, the preventative measures, and maybe we'll be lucky and miss that.
Dale, the premise ID thing,
yep.
And what we've learned through pseudo and those types of things, I think that the state board of animal health are much better equipped to be able to,
I would agree,
at least isolate and contain things. It's still we don't want it, but I do think that those health professionals, animal health professionals, will do all they can to try to contain it.
Minus the feral pig operation, I think we could beat it in time.
Yep. One last thing, if it does come, the worst thing we as a livestock industry can do is try to sneak hogs around in the dead of night and do some things that aren't terribly above board. And
Agreed.
I know people like that. They're friends of mine, who've got ideas and plans. But man, one sneaky little side door slide of, some show guilt somewhere, show south somewhere, and this whole thing could blow up, in a matter of minutes. So that's the one thing we're going to have to be diligent and straightforward and honest when this thing comes, if it ever comes, or we're going to have a tragedy on our hands.
Perfect. Great discussion, guys. We're going to take full advantage of Mr. Rainbows and Butterflies, Ryan Rash, not being with us tonight. We're going to talk about, we talk about these shows. We talk about judges' preferences. We talk about everything on here. And we've touched on this from many different areas, but for the most part, what determines what type of animal is selected in the show ring? Do we have a basis for it? Historically, have we had a basis for it? What keeps judges between those white lines that in theory we have this certain guiding light that keeps us on track in the show ring? Or does it even exist anymore? I'll open that up to whichever one of you. Matt, why don't you jump in?
Well, I think that we do, and Dale, I side with you. It's the fundamentals of function, right? And I don't really care what species it is. They need to be able to move with comfort, and so structure and volume, and then you can throw on balance, and we want performance in all those livestock as well. I think that if you look at a number of the shows, no matter what the species is, maybe structure's not as big a deal in your goat thing, Dale, or it wasn't, but I think that it's coming more into play, though. But, if you just take the cattle shows and you watch gilt shows and breeding sheep shows, like weather dams and stuff, it's really about a functional build. That's at the core. And then you can have the added bells and whistles on top of that, maybe a little cleaner fronted or a tail head laid down a notch neater. But I think you find a lot of officials looking at udders, feet and legs, all the fundamental things, because if we just take cattle, they're a show heifer for what, a year and a half of their life. The rest of their life, they're supposed to be a cow. And so I think most judges try to keep function as the root of everything and then build around that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. I'm going to speak strictly to the swine thing because I'm about as unite species as you can get. The swine thing to me has become very confusing, and I've tried to understand it to a certain degree, and I've tried to understand the mentality. And full disclosure, the three of us sitting here on microphones right now, pretty much spawned from the same era, the same location. I knew both these gentlemen at the U of I when we were all three at school, so we are basically bitter old men, all three of us are, and as such, we're going to come off, or at least I'm going to come off that way a little bit. But I don't fully understand this one. I think how we've arrived at what we've arrived at right now. If you look at the history of livestock evaluation, whether that be judging teams or anything else, when it first started, it was to train people to go out and establish value on hogs at these county fairs and stuff. And this is 100 years ago or so, because that's how you did it back then. As you took them to the county fair, and the one who won the blue ribbon would come home and have production sales and sell hogs higher. It evolved into a teaching tool, but it was still more open show related, adult related. The big boys played with it essentially. And I remember back in, when I was a littler kid, going to the state fair, the old men still showed the pigs. I mean, the junior shows were secondary in the Midwest. Southwest was different, but in the Midwest, we still had the older gentlemen out there showing the pigs and older ladies. And us kids had our own little show, but it was not regarded the same. The Sale of Champions went to the big boys and all that. But it was to train people to go out there and evaluate livestock to establish value. And then at some point in time, it evolved into a junior activity. And when it evolved into a junior activity, we still were supposed to train these people on the traits that we felt like were at the time good for the industry, the swine industry in this case. We'd have type conferences every summer where we'd have discussions about what type of hog was needed. And what you would go back to was there was tangible things you could measure: litter size, growth rate, days 230, whatever it was at the time, loin eye size, if you carcassed them, back fat. All these things were very tangible and very teachable because there was an in measure somewhere in there that had the result. God made pork taste good so that we would make more pork. And it seems like from that time to now, we've lost, and Ryan and Dale have argued about this, and I've heard the foreign to function argument, but we've lost that tangible yardstick to measure things with. In fact, I think it's just the opposite. It sounds like some weird tribal council has got together somewhere and basically said, how far can we take this? How stupid or how silly can we make things? For traits to enhance hogs with, and let's just see how far we can take this. So let's make them grow as slow as they possibly can, and then let's make them grow even slower than that yet again. And then we can't make their structure good enough, so let's feed them really, really slow while they're growing really, really slow. Let's try to make their rumps as square as possible so that we have more farrowing issues than we've ever had before. And then finally, let's see if we can get them really hairy. Because that's an economic trait that we've got in the industry. If we can get them really hairy, boy, that's really cool. And don't get me wrong, it's fun to try to make them that way. And I've always said if it took a 6-year hog with purple spots all over to win a hog show, I try to find one. But this hair thing blows my mind because what I was trained by my dad and my grandpa, and I come across as an old man here, but two things made a hog hairy: either they were sick or they were old. And now it just seems like we're trying to pick traits and accent traits that aren't just related to production; they go against production, and that's what frustrates me. Is teaching this next generation. There's no stockmanship in this. It's making a kit car. It's making a paper mache kit car and not worried about the engine inside of it. That's my soapbox.
Yeah, I think the industry, though, Eric, has changed. So when you started, right, and when you were growing up and I was growing up and Dale, there was still a purebreds had a more significant role in the commercial production of hogs than what they do today. Fair?
Very much so. And there were less shows to show at than there are now, too.
I would agree. Okay. And I mean, I grew up working at the Chicago Atkinson livestock market, and there were always, good purebred guys would bring hogs in there. But I think that the industry had changed, which caused a change in the focus in how that was done. Because you're right, it was more on the open shows and being able to sell your genetics to the commercial producer, right, to be able to do that. And so that has evolved into a different direction. I don't disagree with what you're saying in terms of the age of the hogs that's getting shown. I would be a proponent for having a required average daily gain before you're even eligible to show, a minimum average daily gain to be eligible to show, to maybe try to take some of that and put the real world production back into what we're doing, so that kids can have jobs within this industry and understand where that needs to come from. I think that there's still stockmanship, but I think it's maybe gone beyond traditional stockmanship in terms of caring for the show pigs, right? How many bad hided, bad hair coats do you see in a hog show today?
Fewer and fewer every year.
Fewer and
Very
fewer.
well put. You still, stockmanship involves getting up and feeding and watering at least twice a day, if not more often, making sure that they have a comfortable place to rest and ventilation and all that stuff. And I get all that. And like I said, I come across as an old man who's out of touch, and I get that. But at the same time, I think you're exactly right. And I think we've transitioned to a new thing where junior shows are king, but this is not new. And the ties to any type of tangible thing is where it's at right now, and it's just the way it's going to be. But to eschew from anything that has any sound basis is where I really struggle with, and that's okay. Why are we growing them slow? Because if we grow them fast, their structure is so bad that they're going to blow up. Why are we talking to shag? Well, because slow growing hogs have a lot of hair, so let's just make it positive, so we don't have to worry about.
And then you can
ignoring
bone the
it, so to
legs,
speak.
right?
So,
Then you can bone the legs
yeah,
on
which
those
we did.
hogs.
Yeah,
Right.
which we tried rotor brushes and all that fun stuff. So yeah, and like I said, it's the new era, and I'm not complaining. But then we get into the whole overaging and stuff and all that. The simple result, I don't think we'll ever be able to do an average daily game. We're not an Iowa Derby show, and we never will be on the national scale because there's biosecurity risks there. There's all kinds of problems trying to get accurate ones there. There's welfare risks with these guys starving these pigs down and trying to get them as hungry as possible going into that first way. All kinds of things. The reality is some smart person like you out there, Matt, has got to develop a test where I can get within 3 weeks. If you can get me within 3 weeks of what that actual age of that hog is off of a DNA, pulling hair or blood sample, whatever, then we got something.
Well,
But
we sure talked about
whoever
it,
figures
Eric.
it out.
Yeah, we sure talked about it, right? But there's also those studies have to be done because it's not necessarily anything back in the literature that we can point to. But I agree with you in terms.
No, exactly. And I'm not looking at something where we can nail it to the day. I just want it within 3 weeks. That's that to me at least gets it to where we may be showing hogs in the same calendar year they're born at least, which is nice. So and like I say, I realize other species are different to a certain degree. So I'll shut up on the pig thing, but that's my speech,
No,
so.
this is good. And Matt, you brought up the goats. I'm going to have to make a confession here. I'm as formed to function on sheep and cattle and hogs as I can be. I don't know. I'm sure there's a commercial goat industry, and I've had several message me when I say there isn't. I know there is, but I'm going to be very transparent. I am probably producing some of the most impractical goats with bells and whistles and following a lot of the same things Eric talked about in the swine thing. So I'm very guilty there, yet I expect the other species to follow some practicality. And Matt, I'm with Eric there. Good luck. I appreciate where you're going with an average daily gain. They're never gonna come back. You're aging all of us when you talk about it because they're not going to allow that to come back in. Not that they shouldn't, but I do believe you both hit on it. We've evolved from an open show experience to a junior show experience, and it's, in my opinion, at this point, the value that these junior kids are getting by participating, or I should say, competing in these events is invaluable because we're teaching them some things that they just aren't getting in other facets of life. Even something as simple as respecting the American flag, or a little bit of work ethic, or taking personal responsibility, which it doesn't seem like you have to do that in other segments of our society at this point. That bothered me. So I love the junior show experience. I get it. I'm okay with maybe the show ring not matching the commercial world identically as long as we get that experience. But what I'm thoroughly confused with is what I don't know, because of the disconnect, and Matt, not following what you're talking about, the function, the structural integrity, the volume, the production type traits that are going to allow them to continue and thrive after their show career. I am thoroughly confused 5 or 10 years from now, what is going to dictate what that show animal looks like, because we no longer have to stay between white lines and we don't have a roadmap. I don't know. I'm confused.
Well, let's go back to your commercial goat thing. You know what the goat's trading for? Market goat is trading for now?
High.
Dale?
Lots of money.
$400 a hundredweight. $400 a hundredweight.
Yeah. At a 50-pound, 60-pound goat. Market weight.
Yeah. Market lambs. They've been ranging from
it's
240 to 260.
Crazy high.
They're double what they were last year. So there are those viable industries, but I think that, I know I brought up the average daily gain. It's the same way with breeding cattle stuff. When did we quit weighing the cattle? When did we quit taking measurements on those cattle and giving access to the judges of what those were? why did we? And then if we go back to some of those basic things, I think that we can maybe start to get some things in check.
That makes perfect sense, because I mean, would you both agree that in a let's just say, let's go back to Eric and your Unai species. What is going to determine what a champion show barrel looks like 10 years from now? Can you answer that?
Well, it's whatever, I would never dream to look like it looks like right now. I mean, and I say that because how can we make them appear a certain way on the outside when inside they may not be that way? We don't refer to anything from a carcass standpoint at all anymore. I mean, not at all. So to me, you're going to see more and more, whatever the trend of the day
how about
is.
we call it? How about we call it cartoon-like characters?
Yeah, that's it. Kid cars, cartoon. I've always said it'd be fun to have a super modified class and just see what we could do. But, but there are highly heritable traits and there are traits that are not. And so, certain things we can do pretty quickly. And it's interesting. Like I said, I'm a little glad that we are officially kind of at the end of the rope on this whole thing from a family standpoint, because I don't know where obviously I struggle. I don't know where the next step is. Just when you think you got one figured out, they go to the next step and then you got to feed differently forward. So.
But I think, Eric, the people need to be encouraged to get involved, right? And work so that things can be maybe have a little more industry relative characteristics of it. And it's still a nutrient dense product that we put on the plates for the consumer. Right now, part of it with the swine deal and ractopamine, we've limited our market and where those hogs can be harvested. And they're also a different shape than what the commercial hog is. And so from the automation standpoint, it creates a challenge. Do you agree? I mean, and so
for sure,
I think that the industry needs to continue to have the conversations, though, to make sure and it's always good to sit down and say, why are we doing this? Are we headed down the right path? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What can we change to make improvement, for positive improvement?
Yep.
No, I think you're both right on track. So if I'm hearing things correctly, in an ideal world, if we're in charge of this as a committee of three, we find those boundaries, make sure they're functional enough, make sure all these semi-commercial performance traits are there. And once the group of those that fit that window, if you want to put the bells and whistles on them from that point and make them more kit car or cartoon-like, as long as we're not losing, which is hard to do, some of that practicality of that function, have at it. Use whatever you want, but let's make sure our base fits that window.
And Dale, you know me, I like them about it. I have over the years and still do like them about as extreme as you can do it, and strap as much of the bells and whistles you can on, and let's hang on for the ride. But at the same time, it really comes down to the judges. If a hog's got legs bigger than my thighs, it's probably not 6 months old.
Probably not.
And if somebody says, well, this pig's acceptable from a maturity and freshness standpoint, may not be the most, out there, but fits the parameters of what it's being called, then I think we go a long way. But we've got to find judges who are willing to do that and start adding some more of these things back in there to a certain degree, and not just trying to find the freak on a leash. It's so far out there that they look really cool standing behind it in a backdrop photo.
Agreed. So, well, I think that's good discussion. We're actually running longer than I thought, but we do have one of our guests here, Mr. Fugate. I don't know how he's gonna adjust to this, and maybe a lot of you that are non-swine people wouldn't realize this, but he's been a show dad for about as long as I can remember, and he is recently retired as a show dad. I hope he's adjusting. With that, Eric, being a show dad that long, I would like you to just give us one experience as a show dad that you could have skipped and been better off for it.
All right, and I'll give you that in 1 second. So you're right. I don't think anybody's probably showed as long as we have with one kid. Now,
there has not been.
Yeah,
no way.
That's not on purpose. Nor has I don't think there's anybody and this is not because we've cut
now,
a wide swath
did you
along a
alter?
lot.
Did you alter the birth certificate?
No,
Tell the truth.
there's been people we've thought might have done that. My kid didn't do that. And she actually retired with a few months left in her career. Now, that was because she went on to a job that necessitated that she probably needed to get onto the job. And so Louisville was our last show. And the last thing she did is she won a popper down there for sweepstakes champion. And like I said, we covered the country, and in covering the country over about the 18 years that we showed pigs, maybe a little over than that, mind you, with one kid, she saw the world. She said she's seen everything from the Pacific to the Atlantic, from the Grand Canyon to the Niagara Falls, and she's about right there. And I think in the process, there's nobody's been just dumb enough as we were to not say screw it and stop, or not just not even try. So all that being said, it's behind us now. We sold our truck, we sold our trailer, we're selling our equipment. There are no pigs in the farm, and we've had different ways in the whole family. My wife, Julie, myself, and Maddie have found different ways of coping and grieving over the fact that what we've done for 18 years is over with. And we can go into that at a later date with all three different times, different places, and different scenarios. But the one thing that Dale and I talked about is there one story that sticks out that I would have chose not to do over the years. Because there's a lot of fun stuff that we did, and a lot of traditions we gained, and a lot of people we've met. But the one thing that sticks out happened a long time ago, actually. It was our first trailer. And so I was trying to think about how long ago today that was. That was probably we won our first integrity trailer. We called it the Traveling Trophy in 2007, and that was before then. So it had to be 2005 or six. Springfield, Illinois had two shows one weekend, right the weekend before World Pork Expo. The first show was the Western Illinois Jackpot. The second show was the Illinois Show Pig Association, or the Illinois Purebred Breeders Association show. And then a prospect show and a market hog show the first day. So our idea was take our expo hogs out, take them one day, take them back home that night, and then have our jackpot size hogs, our state fair hogs, and so on and so forth for that second show. So my in-laws live over there in the area, so Maddie and Julie stayed there. I loaded the pigs up, the bigger pigs, to bring back the expo hogs in our little 16-foot low-profile bumper trailer, sheep trailer is what it was. We called it Lammy Pie. And headed for home. Now, it'd been a long day. It'd been a wet day in the wash rack, so I had wet socks. So I unlaced my shoes and took them off. Well, actually, I didn't take them off. I unlaced them to kind of give me some air in there, and that's the key to this whole story. Came home. Now, if you're in the Muhammad area, there's a pizza place called Filippo's Pizza that is an incredibly good pizza, and I recommend it highly to anybody who's ever in the area. It's out here in Muhammad. And so I was excited by myself, so I could pizza I wanted. Great pizza, awesome pizza. Call in, order pizza. Got my truck and trailer. It's about 90 degrees. Gonna stop by, get my pizza, come home, change my shoes, go back out, take the pigs off the trailer, put them in their pens to rest comfortably for the week to Pork Expo. Go in and enjoy this delicious pizza. Get a night's sleep. Come back the next day. So I get home, and those of you who've been to my house, we kind of live on the only hill in Champaign County, I think, but it's not very big, but it's an incline. So we parked. I stopped the truck on the incline to go in and change my shoes. And in my mind, I put the truck in park, but left it running. But in reality, I shut it off and left it in drive. And so as I got out of the truck full of pigs with a pizza in hand, and I want to reiterate, this is a really, really good pizza. I mean, it's awesome. As I'm getting out, the truck starts rolling backwards. So with pizza in hand, in both hands, and not being the most athletic person in the world, I'm already halfway out of the truck. I try to jump back in the truck, but the last thing I want to do is lose this very valuable pizza. So I'm trying to hold on to it. And as I jump back in the truck, I lose my sense of balance and fall. A little like Simone Biles would have done in the Olympics, probably, I suppose. I got the twisties and fell out of the truck. Well, I was still holding on the pizza because I'm not losing that pizza at all costs. And so I kind of fling it over into the yard like a frisbee to try to get it away from the truck as the truck's picking up speed as it's rolling backwards, and I'm kind of hanging out. And I'm not really sure at this point in time why I'm hanging out, but I am literally hanging out the truck, and my leg has bent around the front door. So I feel a warm sensation on my right ear, and I realize that my ear is up against the front tire rolling down the hill. And so I pull my arms back so I don't get my arm ran over. And I guess it's my left ear because I'm on my back. but I feel this warmth, and I had a tire tread on my ear. I was wearing a big Cubs jersey. It was very loose fitting, so it was up around my neck. And I'm getting road rash like no tomorrow as this truck continues to pick up speed going down the hill, but I can't shake my leg free. And I'm just positive I'm going to die. There's no way I'm not going to die. That truck's going to roll over on top of me or something, and we're on a very seldomly traveled road, and we're in trouble. And all that. Now, my neighbor, we live in an old farmhouse. We have 3 houses on the same property that we're an old farmstead. He sometimes is out hot tubbing on Saturday nights, so I'm yelling over there. Nobody out hot tubbing didn't hear me. I got lucky enough after about 50 yards going down the gravel. The truck and trailer basically jackknifed into each other and stopped, but I'm still hanging there. End up what happened is my loose shoe had got behind the brake and hung up on the brake behind it. And that was what was holding me in the truck, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but it did. So I finally was able to wiggle my shoe loose and get out of the truck, limp back up, and I had to get the pizza. And went back in the house. And I'm bleeding from a lot of spots. I've got road rash essentially from my right thigh all around my belly to my left side and up my left side and on my neck and my ear and all that. And so I'm pretty shook up, and I think I'm in bad shape. I really think I probably need to go to the emergency room because I'm bleeding pretty bad. So I called my wife over to her my father-in-law's. My father-in-law answers the phone. I said, "Hey, I've had an accident. I need to talk to Julie." And he tries to ask what, and I said, "Just give her to me." And he goes, I could hear him saying, "He's really screwed up. I don't know what's going on. You better talk to him." So she comes to the phone. Of course, her first question is, "What happened? And it's hard to describe. It's taken me 5 minutes, and I'm just now getting to the punchline here, so to speak. So so she's a knower and she wanted to know everything. But in the end, I just basically said, "I'm really screwed up. I don't know what to do." And she says, "Well, you're going to get infected." Okay, maybe, I don't know. So she says, "You need to spray something and all that." Road rash. So I went over to the medicine cabinet while I'm talking to her, and I look in there, and there is Solarcade, gets the red out. Well, I'm really red. So it's got, and so I get the Solarcade out. It's supposed to heal sunburns. Well, this is kind of like a sunburn. So I start spraying this Solarcade on my entire body. Well, Solarcade's got alcohol in it, guys. And it got into all that road rash, and that was the most pain. It dropped me on the ground. I'm screaming. I'm in bad shape. I get up, I pick all the gravel out, I take a shower, hose it off, eat what's left of my pizza, and take some Vicodin and go to bed. The next day, I go back to the hog show, and nobody could believe I was still alive the way my body looked. But that continues on, where I've had pretty much for about 5 years there. Every year before the Pork Expo, I had some kind of weird accident that most people couldn't imagine. But that was probably as close to death as I've ever come. And the one thing from a show dad's perspective over the last 18 years that I probably wish didn't. So
I love it. I love it. And the pizza was pretty much saved.
It was actually damn good pizza. That was the only thing that was good about the night. It was damn good pizza.
I love it.
Ham with the extra cheese. It was really good. In fact, I may have to go order one right now. I might just do that. So, but yeah, that's a story that one of my go-to stories, and I didn't embellish much. I really didn't. It was that bad. I had road rash for about 3 weeks that summer and couldn't walk very well. And the consensus the next day was nobody could believe that I was still up and moving the way my body looked, especially when I raised my shirt and showed my belly. So, yeah.
I can imagine that was just beautiful.
It sounds like that really wasn't necessarily about showing pigs, but about saving the pizza.
I saved the pizza, which is a continuing story of my life. There's some safety aspects to it from a trailer perspective, I suppose.
Okay.
Work a lot smarter in the future. Get the level ground when you park your trailer would be one, I suppose. But yeah, that was my.
So you have saved a lot of show dads from getting run over with their truck and trailer. Now.
Yeah, and it was simple. Put it in drive and then shut it and shut the damn thing off. But I didn't, and so yeah, that's what happened. So that's my story. But we're at the end of the rope, and the kid's having a hard time with it. I'm having a hard time with it. The wife is. We're looking for hobbies. If anybody's got a hobby they want to throw my way, I'll take it into advisement. I'm thinking drinking more, but I haven't decided anything more than that. So we'll see. State Fair next week is going to be a little rough, but we'll get through it. So
I love it. Okay, in the tradition, or in honor of holding the tradition, we have question and answer. And Ryan would say this is usually his favorite part. I dug deep to find a question I thought that might be appropriate for Matt and for Eric. We're going to start with Matt. This comes to us from Jonathan. I've been showing sheep and goats for several years, And it has more recently been brought to my attention that there are some families that are bringing people in to perform unethical practices on show stock. What can we do to help stop this from happening? Matt, you may be the only one on the planet that can come to an answer that might work.
Something you can do to help stop this.
Something Jonathan can do to help stop this from happening.
Jonathan can be an advocate for doing things right and making sure that first and foremost his family and his kids do what is appropriate with their livestock. And I would say it's always good to talk to the show officials about what can be done to help alleviate maybe some of those potential situations. And there's different work that's being done to try to be able to quantify and assess how those things may be happening, and just be informed and help be an advocate for the show, I think, so that you can be part of the solution and don't veer over to be being part of the problem.
Excellent. And I think that's just dead on, Matt. And Jonathan, I guess we hope, or we would hope, that those parents that are involved, that are aware of some of these things that are going on, would just not allow their children to be exposed to it. And let's hope that somehow comes around to being the limiting factor. And by you setting that example and others setting examples that, hey, we're going to expose our kids to doing the right thing and do what's correct and above board and doesn't harm our food supply and doesn't violate ethical rules and regulations. So good question, Jonathan. I wish it was something we did not have to address, but it's there. And I think everybody doing the right thing and setting the best examples, a direction that we need to go. So thank you, Matt, for addressing that. The next one is for Eric, and I don't know how this is going to go, Eric. I just don't. I could answer this question and probably have too many times on here, but we're throwing it to you. There's one of the few swine questions that we had left. Logan submits this question. This is only my second year showing pigs, and as I go to larger shows, I've noticed people mixing many supplements into their feed. What are these, and should I be feeding supplements to succeed? You better be honest here, because I will call you out.
We talked about it last time, and I know Logan's probably young, but I'm going to say it. I'm a supplement whore, and I come from a family that's probably got a bunch of us that are. So the key to this is, and my family makes fun of me, and my not my immediate family, but the ones that don't live with me, because I do this, is the key is
the ones the PhD members,
smarter ones. Yeah.
Okay.
You need to make sure that the pigs are getting a minimum level of just straight nutritional feed every day. Okay. Now, if they're doing that, then you're all right. What I find myself sometimes doing is, well, I want to feed it this, and this for 4 different reasons. And I'll put that in there and then realize, well, shit, they only ate half the feed because they were too busy eating the crap supplements I had in there. And as such, we're not accomplishing anything then, because we're getting half of our supplements ate, we're getting half of our feed ate, and the pigs just sit there spinning. So the first thing is, you have to make sure that you understand what that pig needs in terms of a daily poundage of nutrition, and that you're getting that to them. And secondly, that the ration's balanced enough where you're not screwing that up. And then past that, where you at? It depends on the level you're playing at. I firmly believe and I'm adroit right now because my joints are old. I mean, I think there are certain soundness supplements that will ease joint pain. It's not going to fix a crippled hog, but it's going to give you an extra % or 2 in terms of just comfort level based on that. There are certain supplements that are probably going to open the airways up and give you maybe a little more ability to navigate in the show ring for a longer period of time. We talked about Paline earlier. There are things like that that can do that. And anybody who tells me that supplements aren't needed, watch the Olympics. I can guarantee you that every one of those Olympics are on some type of vitamin, mineral, supplement pack of some kind. The weightlifters are probably on all kinds of protein packs. And I'm talking about legal stuff here, not illegal stuff. But humans in general take supplements every day just to be healthy. And the same thing needs to be said for animals. Where we get into problems, like we talked last podcast I was on, is where we think there's one super supplement that can do 5, 10, or 20 things at the same time, and it's not there. I'm looking for 3, 4, or 5 things that give me a couple percentage points higher, and I'm looking for ways of delivering that to the animal where I'm still not screwing up their consumption and their ability to consume on a daily basis.
That was an honest answer. I like that answer.
So. Oh, no doubt. And so what we started to do this first year is I would mix all the small supplements, not talking like the beet pulp filler, or we use gut candy or whatever, gut candy and some of those products, but the smaller things, the glucosamine chondroitin and stuff that might open their airways and stuff. We'll feed that first. We'll sweeten it up so they'll eat it. And we'll feed that first and make sure they get it down, or we'll drench them with it. We'll put it in their mouth, make sure they get that, and then we'll go back and feed them secondarily, so that we make sure we're getting both of them in that way, and we don't destroy that.
I love it. Well, guys, Matt, Eric, I greatly appreciate you coming on today. I think you wealth of knowledge. We will bring you on, and if you noticed, Ryan and I don't bring many guests on because we generally don't have a topic until we start. We're not the most organized in the world. There's various reasons. It's not intentional, but you guys are pretty easy. We just call you up outside of Eric's technical issues and his internet. It's not difficult whatsoever. But I do appreciate you coming on. Thank you for such. Provided that Ryan has not been kidnapped, he will be with us next week for Beyond the Ring in hopes of a Beyond the Circus. And Eric or Matt, you would enjoy coming on for Beyond the Circus. You can just cut loose, do it. Direction you want to go.
I've heard stories. Ryan's out there doing his thing because I've heard stories about it. So I know he's present and accounted for in one way or another.
I think that you're probably past day 18. Wasn't that the magic day for Ryan? For him to be on the road?
I think he's well into the 20s. So he may have just gone off the edge. You just don't know. He's pushing his limit right now. He's not going to make it to 31 is my bet. I would like to put odds on that in Vegas that he will not make it to day 31. But hopefully he'll be back. We'll record midnight, whatever time we've got to record to get it done next week. And hopefully within a week or so, we'll do Beyond that Circus, because there's a lot of things. As you notice, we went a little long today, but there's a lot to talk about. But thank you, guys.
I'm holding my fist up in solidarity for Ryan right now.
Thank you.
Until next week, be safe.